All right, we're going to get started. Thank you everyone for joining. By the way, I just put everyone on mute. It's really just because there's some background noise that's going on. It could be very distracting. If you have any questions, anything to add whatsoever, these sessions, for those of you who have not joined these sessions before, these sessions are meant to be completely interactive. There is no script. There is no presentation. What we're doing is we're talking about Salesforce release management, meaning the Salesforce releases that come out 3 times a year. The best practices, talking about the pain points that you guys might have as it relates to how do you become aware of when the releases happen? How do you become aware of the features and enhancements that are included in any release? How do you gain the knowledge and understanding and confidence about talking about any of these releases? And then how do you go about sharing, not only enabling those releases, but then sharing the existence of these releases, of these new features included in the newest release with your end users within the organization that you're working in. So really that's what we're talking about during this particular session. So I'm going to sort of open it up to all of you. And again, just unmute yourselves if you have anything to add whatsoever. My question for you guys is, what do you find as the most painful aspects associated with managing the Salesforce releases? I'll be the first to say it is completely overwhelming. It's overwhelming for me, and I know for anyone else who's living and breathing Salesforce stuff all day long. And it could be a real challenge. I'm always looking to improve on the process myself of doing all the things that I talked about earlier. But I want to hear from you guys. What do you find as the most painful aspects associated with release management in Salesforce?
I know for our company,
yeah,
working from multiple sandboxes, being able to get that pre-release, the sandbox ready for pre-release and be able to test that has been an issue in the past.
Is it accessing the sandbox? Is it just having the time to be able to do it? Like what aspects of it, Brandon?
Well, as we're constantly deving, we're working on a major ERP transition. Having the time to refresh the sandbox to meet that deadline, to have it refreshed in time to catch the next wave has been the main issue. It's just finding the time to refresh it where we don't lose our dev work.
And how are you handling that today?
Not very well. Our that main sandbox, like I said, where we're doing a lot of that transition work, is still stuck in the previous editions, and so we have a second full sandbox that we're really doing our day-to-day development, that we can refresh and catch those early releases.
It's definitely hard. So just to bring everyone else up to speed, to make sure everyone else is fully understanding what Brandon's talking about. So in addition to the releases that Salesforce is putting out, if internally within your own organization, you're working on internal releases, internal enhancements, boosting internal functionality that you have going on, it becomes even more of a challenge, because not only do you have to test out what is it that Salesforce is introducing in the latest release, you've got your own ball of wax that you're trying to make sense of and enhance features on and iron out any bugs and do user acceptance testing on that by itself. And if that takes time, so much time that, let's say right now we're up to the spring 20 release, but and I'm not trying to insinuate anything that Brandon said, but if within your organization, the testing and development that you've been doing is not even up to the spring release, we're still working on the winter, the prior release that we haven't even had a chance to catch up with the existence of the spring release, it makes it even more daunting to maintain your sanity and to stay ahead of it all.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I was going to say,
so that definitely is a challenge. So it looks like Karen has a question for you, Brandon, about your hat.
Oh,
where'd you get it?
I picked it up at Dreamforce this last year, in the Trailhead certification area.
Cool. That's what I thought, but I wasn't. It's great. It looks good on you.
So as a general rule, usually at World Tours as well as Dreamforce, Salesforce has one of the many booths that they have at these events. One booth is for certification, just putting my own phone on mute just to make sure it doesn't start ringing for no reason. And basically all you have to do is step over to the booth. You confirm that you actually are certified, have at least one certification, and then you can get whatever it is that they're giving out, a baseball hat, a mug, t-shirt, etc. Yeah.
Hey, David, I was going to say one of the things that I find just sort of as an annoyance is each time the release is about to come up, I've got to check and make sure, is my Sandbox on the track to get the new release, or do I have to do a refresh beforehand, or what happens if I need to do a refresh and then I might lose it? It's tricky. I mean, the information's out there to find, but it's just sometimes tough to dig out and find.
It absolutely is. I think that there's so much involved when it comes to a new release that I think Salesforce as a company sort of struggles. They try really hard to make it all the information centralized and relatively easy to find. But then each topic by itself, for example, how to make sure that your sandbox, that you have a sandbox, or that your existing sandbox will get that preview of the upcoming release, is a challenge by itself. What I'm going to do is now I'm going to show you guys. I rely on a couple of resources for myself just to keep my own sanity and to allow myself to stay up to speed with the latest releases. So one of them, let me pull up my screen right here.
One of the biggest problems, I think, is the lots of mails that we've got, previous to the release is you may be affected, you may have this, you may have, tell me if we have it and if we will be affected or not, and I'll know how to comment on that.
I completely get it. Yeah, having vague emails can be a challenge too. I agree 100%.
That makes too many emails, makes the admins just ignore it all.
Yeah, that's true. So here I am in the Trailblazer community, and there is for those of you who are not familiar with the Trailblazer community, there are all different kinds of groups. And one of the groups that I rely on heavily, especially as it relates to staying on top of the latest releases, is the Release Readiness Trailblazers group. And within this group, what you're going to find on the left-hand side of the group, you're going to find some incredibly valuable resources. So, by the way, I rely heavily on the resources that are available on the left-hand side. So what we were talking about before, just to follow up from Bill's comment, is right here, Sandbox Preview Instructions. And if I navigate over to it, basically it's going to show and explain how you can find out if your sandbox is scheduled to be part of the pre-release, the preview, and if so, when you can expect to get it. So, and yeah, just the information in here can be daunting just to process it, because as admins, we typically have a lot on our plate to begin with, and we just want to know, like, yes, no, am I getting it? And if so, when am I getting it? To try to decipher all of this, it's a lot. It's very daunting, 100%. I want to hear more from you guys in terms of particular pain points before I start sharing some resources that I love and diving a little bit deeper in the group that I shared with you a moment ago. I'm going to put the link to the group in the chat window in the Zoom meeting, so you guys can click on it and access it right now.
Hey, Dave, I got another one for you. Release notes. I know nobody in this planet, I don't think, ever reads them from cover to cover. How do you handle them? Do you try and, just sort of go through the summaries and pick out things that look interesting, or?
Yeah. So what I typically do is, let's go back to sharing over here. So what I typically do is, yes, the release notes. So let's just navigate into the release notes real quick, just to bring everyone on the same page. So like when you're starting from here, so this is for the spring 20 release, what we're looking at on my screen. So a lot of times what I'll do is, like if I know most of my clients are on Sales Cloud, so I might first go into sales. And the challenge with that is there are so many layers here. Each one is going to bring me down another rabbit hole And then I sort of need to remember how to go back to, and like which level I was at before I went down a particular path. And that's where it could be very overwhelming. There's a lot of information in here. So what I often do is, first of all, sometimes I'll just poke around without the stress of, okay, go down a rabbit hole, whatever. I only have a couple of minutes in between certain meetings. So I'll just start poking around over here and read something. And to the extent, by the way, once you get to, I'll sort of click randomly in here, productivity features, and then let's go into any one of these. So you can see once you get to the most granular level, very often there are screenshots and there's very granular instructions on how to, let's say, either enable or leverage a particular feature. So the release notes are fantastic. One of the beautiful things, as I talked about a moment ago, sort of how do I get back? If I look back over here, I'm like, oh, wait a minute. All I have to do is go right here to get back to sales. I could start from the top again. So it does make it a little bit easy, but I sort of want to remember for myself, like which path did I take and where do I want to go back to? Because a lot of times I think most of us get caught up in the guts of like what's in the body of the screen and not even realize that the what's it called? Breadcrumb trail is right over there on the very top. So the release notes are great, but you can easily get lost within them. What I typically rely on, and this usually comes out quite a bit later as it relates to each release, the resource that I absolutely love the most that Salesforce puts out is the release overview deck. So the release overview deck, for those of you who are not familiar with it, if I go over here and click on this, it's basically going to take me to, it's just a post it's a chatter post over here. And basically what it's going to, let me go ahead and download it and then I'll show you exactly what it is. I don't think that's true, that the URL no longer exists. I think it's actually going to download it. Let's see. Or let's go back a little bit. Let's click over here. Is it downloading? I can't even, yeah, it's downloading. So I'll open it up as soon as it comes up. So the release overview deck, basically what it is a completely editable PowerPoint. For those of you who are admins, particularly in large organizations, those of you who are user group leaders, this is so incredibly powerful. So let me open it up and then I'll switch the share. Once I have PowerPoint open on my desktop, I'm going to switch the share so you can see it in PowerPoint. This PowerPoint can be anywhere from 170 to like 200 plus pages long slides. I'll show you over here. So this one for the Spring 20 release, you can see over here on the bottom, it shows that it's 193 slides. And what this was made purposely to be completely editable so that if you're the admin within an organization and either certain products or certain features are not being used within your organization, you can just delete those slides. You don't need them whatsoever. You could totally delete them. For those where, let's say, the screens are customized and you have, let's say, a particular screen and you would rather replace this screenshot with a screenshot that is more representative of the customizations that are going on within your org, you could simply swap this screenshot for a screenshot that you create yourself. So this PowerPoint is organized in a way that it makes it very easy to navigate through. It's overwhelming in terms of the depth, the content that's in here, but it's very easy to navigate through. So you can see like each section, like here, we're looking at Salesforce overall, and now it's going to basically like a subsection. And then you can see over here that there's a hyperlink directly to the release notes that relate to this particular area. And then when we get to any particular content, you can see over here, let me adjust my screen a little bit. You can see that Salesforce also gives you speaker notes for each relevant slide within the PowerPoint. So what I typically do as a user group leader, what I typically do is once the release overview deck is available, let me click the stop share. Once the release overview deck is available, as a user group leader, what I do is I will download that release overview deck. I will start trimming it, taking out those either products or features that I think are not really the more common products or features that I think my user group is interested in. So usually I'll keep with the most core fundamental elements of the Salesforce platform, and I'll keep with those features. And by the way, even trimming it down to that point, I'm usually getting it down to about 70 slides. When you're doing a presentation of 70 slides, and if you keep just 1 minute per slide, that's an hour and 10 minutes without allowing anyone to ask any questions. That's a lot. That's asking a lot from the people within the audience. So I try to trim it down to approximately 40 some odd slides. And even then, it can be very challenging to get through, because sometimes all it takes is one slide that can lead to very engaged conversation among everyone in the room that could easily take 10 or 15 minutes just with one slide up on the screen. So as a user group leader, I leverage the release overview deck heavily in order to provide me as a user group leader an easy way of getting the content that I need for my upcoming user group meetup. As a Salesforce consultant or as a Salesforce admin, I'm using the same exact PowerPoint in order to have the conversation with each of my clients regarding, here are the new features that recently came out that are most relevant to you for your organization. Let's say because you are using Pardot, because you are using CPQ, because you are using email templates, you really need to know about these particular features, while at the same time, again, removing out all of those features that are not relevant based on what they are not using within their organization. So the release overview deck is an incredibly valuable resource. Anyone here have used it before? Wow, a lot of you have never used it before, never used the release overview deck, so I'm glad I'm able to share it with you.
I've never used it, but I was at a presentation where they were using parts of it. This was part of a nonprofit group I attended.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's nice to see.
Incredibly helpful. So let me share with you some other resources. Let's go back to sharing my screen.
Hey, David, this is Debbie. We've used it within our organization too.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's great. It's great to have.
Yeah.
David, I've used it as a community group leader, but I feel like that's a lot of time that regular users who aren't community group leaders will have to spend to do that. And it is great to use in your organization. One of the things that before I became a community group leader that I used to do is make sure I was signed up for multiple different blogs, yours, Salesforce Ben, there's so many out there, and they all seem to highlight their favorite things. So that is something, if you're new to Salesforce, that could be very valuable for you.
Absolutely. Blogs are a great resource. Thanks, Melissa, for the feedback. Blogs are definitely a great resource to leverage. At the same time, depending on the person who's writing the content, sometimes they're only giving a paragraph or maybe just 3 sentences to a particular topic or feature that you are super interested in, like you'd love to dive deeper into it. So that's where it's sort of like, okay, now where do I go for more? The good thing is usually most of the folks who are doing the blogging are giving the direct link for where that content resides in the release notes so that you can easily get to it to dive deeper to the extent that content is there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I do agree that the slide deck is the best place to get a high level overview of most of the things that are in there.
It's a lot.
There's always going to be something that isn't in that deck though. And usually it's some sort of programming thing that's hidden in there that you will find out when you run into it, and it prohibits you from doing what you expected to do.
Yeah, I can tell you that even for myself, very often, I'll be looking at something on the screen and all of a sudden I'm like, what is that button? I've never noticed that icon before. What the heck? And I overlooked it myself because it was part of a recent release. And I go back to the release overview deck or the release notes, or just do a Google search to start looking for it to learn more about that particular feature. So yeah. It could be a real challenge. And like, who was it that put it in? Marissa commented, it's a great way to impress your manager. For sure. It is definitely a great way to impress your manager. I can tell you that also for myself as a consultant. I'm I am very transparent. I try to be very transparent in everything that I do. So even as a consultant, when I'm working with my clients and I'm showing them that document, the version of that PowerPoint that I trimmed down specifically for them, I am completely telling them I got the original from Salesforce. The original was 190 plus slides, but I trimmed it down to 60 slides for them. They're still super impressed. So, yeah, it's a great way to A, get the job accomplished, and B, you're still impressing people because they're like, hey, you found it. I had no idea it existed. And either way, it's a valuable resource. I want to call out a couple of other resources that I think you guys will find helpful. So another one is, let me pull it up on the screen since I'm sharing my screen. On YouTube, Salesforce has a channel called Salesforce Releases. So if I go to the channel itself, this is what the channel looks like. And if I look under playlists, you will see over here, there are going to be playlists for each release. So if I look, for example, at the spring release, just by looking at it, you can see that there are 50 videos in there. If I click here to view the full playlist, you can see over here just from the timelines that each one of these are relatively short videos. So this is another way that you could do one of two things. You could either learn for yourself to like enhance your own knowledge base of what is included with the most recent release. You can also leverage these videos to just cut and paste the URL for just the specific videos that are relevant to share it with the people that you need to communicate. Hey, by the way, here's this really cool feature. I think it's worth enabling, it's worth training our users on how to leverage this feature to share it within your own organization, as well as going back to that release overview deck. If you are going to leverage it, go ahead and leverage the corresponding video, if appropriate, corresponding video to pop it into that PowerPoint so you can have everything all in one place. So YouTube is another fantastic resource in order to stay on top of the latest releases.
Does this include critical updates?
Honestly, I don't know. I would say sometimes it depends. I don't know how Salesforce chooses particularly which features to include in the YouTube channel.
It's really rare that there's a YouTube on those critical updates. Except security ones that were out recently.
Has anyone here used has anyone here relied on the Salesforce Releases channel on YouTube before?
Yeah, I send the team links. They like videos. I get more views and interests with videos
than articles.
Yeah. I don't know, maybe it's the English, maybe it's the, I don't know, maybe it's the visualization, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think it's true. I think it's true for a lot of people. And you'll see very often, especially when it comes to social media. I mean, we see that on pretty much every social media platform where the not only allowing for video, but embracing video, sometimes even prioritizing video is a trend that we're seeing everywhere. People are liking videos. When I say liking, I don't mean in terms of clicking the like button. People are preferring content in the form of video far more than simply the written word or just.
And it's short and it's dedicated to this particular change, and not a long article with lots of things.
Right. So especially if it's, so what I have personally found is that video is super powerful in two ways. First, when you were talking about leveraging a tool, a platform, and talking about here's how to use this particular feature that's available, regardless of what platform or what technology we're talking about. The truth is, even if we're not talking about technology, here's how to peel an apple without getting cut. So the demonstrating how to do something using video makes it far easier to process, far easier to understand, and far easier for the person who's creating the content, not only the person who's receiving the audience to consume the content. It makes it far easier to produce, usually, and far easier to consume and to understand everything that was contained in the video than another format. The other thing is when we're talking about, even if it's just a talking head, it comes down to the psychology of people, and people resonate better with an actual talking head with a face that's live, and even getting aside from the audible change in tone of someone's voice, the facial expressions that correspond with it, that resonates with people in a very, very strong way. And that's why you see even on things like Instagram and Instagram Live and Instagram videos, like even with stories, where it's just a person talking about something, you could just have the same thing transcribed. You can get the exact same content, but there's far more that you're going to get, not only with the tone, but also the facial expressions that come along with it, where you can get a sense of if that person is annoyed, happy, excited, etc. Far more with the facial expression that goes along with that. So I agree 100%. Video is pretty strong. Videos are, people love video, and there are good reasons why.
Like Zoom instead of just an article.
And not only that, also with Zoom, and by the way, I'm not at all criticizing anyone who has their camera turned off right now. I'm not, I promise. But even when leveraging Zoom for having your camera open, I can tell you that for me, working remote most of the time, almost all of the time, I find that when I'm having a Zoom meeting and if I don't have my camera on, people struggle a little, A, with struggling with paying attention, B, struggling with actually listening to the words of what I'm saying and comprehending what I'm saying. And what I find is that the meetings typically go way better when the camera is turned on. So as a general rule, I keep the camera turned on practically all the time, which might annoy some people because they feel like, oh, I'm not ready to turn my camera on. From my perspective, like, I don't care if you turn the camera on or not. But at least for me, I find that it generally works better. It sets a different tone within the meeting, and it has people feel that they're actually working together with a real human being and not just some voice that they could just disengage from or sort of ignore. So going back to some of the resources, one of the other resources that I think are incredibly helpful, Salesforce has Release Readiness Live is what they call it. And it's typically available on salesforce.com/live. And Salesforce is typically putting out all kinds of notifications, letting people know, letting admins know. Most of us as admins, we're probably getting those notifications, probably ignoring them, that of when Salesforce Live will actually be available and be live and be streamed, as well as once it's recorded, where to find those actual recordings. So here you can see, I'm sharing on my screen the playlist for the Release Readiness Live for the Spring 20 release. And even as you can see from the video, from the thumbnails of the videos, this is quite different from what we saw before on YouTube. Because if I go on YouTube over here, these are not talking heads. These are simply, typically, these are just sharing of the screen, talking about conceptually what's going on, and the sharing of the screen showing here's how to use the feature, here's how the feature looks in Salesforce, versus Release Readiness Live, where it's a little bit more discussion, a little bit more explanation, plus showing the actual video. So these are actually a little bit longer. And with these, what you're going to see is, again, just looking at the playlist, you're going to see, like, let's say for Lightning Flow, it's just one video. That one video could be pretty long because it's talking about all the different things that were included with Lightning Flow. So it could be 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 40 minutes long just for that one video, versus here on YouTube, all of these are typically just a few minutes, just showing the how it's represented on the actual screen. So this is another great resource to leverage. And again, going back to over here in this community, in the Release Readiness Trailblazers community, group, I should say, you will see that on the left-hand side, you're going to have all of those, the links to all of those resources are right here on the left-hand side. Any questions about any of that? All right.
A lot of stuff right there. A lot of stuff.
There is. So I'll tell you what, as it relates to, let me stop sharing the screen. So as it relates to like each release, I see the steps of what needs to happen in the following way. Basically, I think the first thing that needs to happen as an admin, the first thing that we need to do is we need to become familiar with all of the relevant features that are included in the newest release. So it's first about ourselves to sort of increase our own knowledge, our own expertise, our own confidence on those features. So the first, selfishly, it's about you. You need to learn what features are included, how to use those features, whether or not, and try to get a sense of whether or not those features are actually going to help within your organization. The next thing that you need to do is to get access to a sandbox where you can actually start playing around with those features. And that goes back to where I showed you earlier of how to see whether or not you have a sandbox, or even to create a sandbox where those features will be available to you prior to those features actually being released to everyone. The next thing that you need to do, once you have access to the once you are familiar with the features yourself, you have access to the sandbox, then you need to start actually playing around. Sometimes it means enabling certain features. Sometimes it means, you know, those features are just there by default. Playing around with those features so that you start feeling comfortable with those features themselves, and to get a sense of whether or not it's worthy to share with your users, whether or not, if there's the option to enable or disable it, whether or not you want to enable those features, and to start thinking about the messaging, aside from identifying which features are worthy of calling out, of educating our users about. The next thing that you need to think about is the messaging that you're going to leverage in order to start sharing with your users the fact that these features are either going to be available or are now available. In other words, you're waiting until they're actually available for everyone to actually tell them now available, so you can start building that content right away. And then what you need to do, lastly, what you need to do is you need to start building out that content, and that content, the actual messaging for the end users. And by the way, a lot of people just struggle with that one. And we can certainly talk about best practices associated with even just this very last piece, which has nothing to do with learning the features. Just how do we go about communicating as an admin? How do we go about communicating to our end users the fact that these new features exist? Like just the fact that you even created a validation rule, that you created a new lightning flow in Salesforce, the fact that you created a new page layout or a new record type. Just because you went and did it and it's in production and everything is working properly, it's not over then. We still need to communicate appropriately to our end users to let them know, by the way, you're going to notice this new thing that we just rolled out for you, and here's why. It's meant to help you, and here's how it's going to help you, to let them become familiar with it. So, and by the way, as an admin, spending the time and resources to educate them will also, think of it selfishly even for you, that's going to prevent people from coming to you later and complaining about those features and saying, what the heck's going on? Now when I go to click new opportunity, it's presenting me with a screen asking me what kind of opportunity it is. What's that all about? Can you get rid of it? What does that mean? So this way you're proactively thinking through, before enabling those record types on opportunities, I need to create the messaging associated with it, letting them know that starting whatever date, starting Monday morning, you're going to see the following happen on the opportunity screen. So you need to think about what kind of messaging you're building out for your end users about all of the features that will be available to them, that is relevant for them, that you're going to enable for them, and here's how it's going to help them. Talk to me. Tell me what you guys are struggling with as it relates to all of that.
I have a question, David.
Yes.
So how do you manage the different versions of the sandbox? So because in the past we have struggled with, our sandboxes are in different versions. We refreshed it. Sometimes we couldn't refresh it. But then we developed something in a lower environment, which was recently refreshed with a new version. You deploy it and it gives you a big red error saying your targeted sandbox is on the older version. Either wait for it to update, or else you have to do everything manually again.
It's It's hard. So generally speaking, what you have to do is you have to have another sandbox that has the latest release, and then do a change set to move your functionality into that sandbox with the newest features. In order to test out everything that you have in all of the custom functionality that you have in your sandbox with the newest features. Now, the reason why I'm suggesting moving it into another sandbox that has the newest features versus simply upgrading the existing sandbox is because you're not going to have a way to undo. You're going to have so if you encounter any errors, any inconsistencies, any issues, you're not going to have the ability to look and see, to evaluate how was it done before. How was it working previously? Because maybe a particular bug, maybe it existed also in the prior release. So it's a challenge, especially if you have different builds that are taking place in multiple sandboxes, not only one.
No, we don't build in multiple sandboxes. We have a proper strategy from developer to partial to UAT. But yeah, again, we cannot have a separate UAT, right? We get that problem when we go to the UAT, and we cannot have another UAT because it would cost us. So in that case, we struggle a lot.
Yeah. So I'm guessing what you're talking about, the UAT is a partial sandbox where you have some data in there.
Sandbox.
Yeah. Yeah, so one of the things that you might want to do is you might want to have it as a developer sandbox and then to manually populate it with some sample data to test everything out.
So quite often when I've run into this situation, I found that it's not that we were developing for the new functionality that's in the most current release, that it's just that we have a sandbox that we were developing in that has the current release, and the code needs to be rolled back to the last Apex version. The only time that I have not been able to roll it back to the previous Apex version that I'm pushing to the next sandbox is when I'm developing for a community. We recently ran into we were doing a lightning upgrade on our community, and we actually forgot to refresh the next sandbox and had to rebuild the whole community. But most often you can roll back your code API version. Have you tried that?
Excellent point, Melissa. Yeah. Has anyone else struggled with this? And if so, how have you tackled this issue? This, by the way, goes completely right back to what Brandon called out earlier, just calling it out. So it is a common issue. What do you guys see as the most painful aspects that you're struggling with? Aside from the ones that we've talked about already, what other painful aspects are you struggling with as it relates to keeping up with the latest releases?
I think, like you mentioned, finding the best way to inform the end users about it, and really look at is there any way to roll out these changes rather than them just be live for those users. I know.
Wait, so hold on, Brandon. I just want to make sure I understand what you just said. So I think, so are you suggesting, like, is there any way to do it in piecemeal versus all at once? Is that it?
Yeah, I know there's been some things with releases where, we have to add the users to a permission set and Salesforce builds those in there, but there's some of them that it just goes live and it changes the way that they're working. It'd be easier. It's not necessarily easier. It's more work for me in the end to add permission sets and things. But when you're managing a release cycle with your current development and that, trying to make sure everybody's informed before it flips the switch is the troublesome piece.
It's a lot. It definitely is a lot. And a lot of times admins are not even given the directive, like no one is necessarily calling out to the admin, and it's not necessarily top of mind for the admin. All of the elements associated with managing the internal communication. And that is an absolute critical piece, because you could build the best Salesforce configuration, but if your end users are not familiar with how to leverage what you've built, You might think it's super intuitive, but if you never taught them what it's about, as obvious as it might seem to us as admins, they're not going to use it. And they're not going to have any clue. And very often within organizations, nobody is necessarily calling out or asking of the admin to build that communication piece. So it becomes a painful missing gap. Painful not because anyone is complaining about it, painful because, like I said before, if they're just not aware of it, if there's a vacuum, if there's a void of communication, it becomes, adoption is low. And that brings out a whole other horrible cycle. Once adoption is low, then data quality is low. Data quality is low, and then internally within the organization, someone's talking about sales manager says, hey, can you show me your pipeline report? I want to see all the deals you're working on, because when I look in Salesforce, here's what I see, but I know that you're working on other deals. And when the sales rep says, yeah, I've got it all in an Excel spreadsheet right here, you know, as all of that happens, people are going to wonder, then if everyone's using Excel, why do we have Salesforce? And like, that's not the point. The point for the organization to have Salesforce was to have a centralized consolidated database, a record of truth of what deals we have going on within the organization. So it can easily spiral out of control. And for a lot of I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was saying definitely, and one way we've kind of combated that over the past 2 years is we have our yearly sales meeting, and we've actually put together a PDF and printed copy of a user's manual for our org, for our different divisions that work within it, highlighting those changes. And, you know, continued reinforcement of those changes and training helps a lot as well, because if you teach them once, they're going to fall back in their old habits.
That's right. That's right. And now what I've also found to be a little challenging is, like, if we go down the road of creating a user manual, first of all, it takes a long time to create that document. And that document can easily be, like we were talking before, about a PDF that's a PowerPoint that's 190 some odd pages. Your user manual can easily be double or triple that, easily, depending on how granular you get. Like, how to create a lead. What is a lead? How, you know, what's the difference between a lead and a contact? How to convert a lead? Like, it could be a lot. So I personally try to lean away from having to rely on creating or maintaining the documentation. And instead, I personally prefer to rely on video, going back to what we were talking about earlier, to rely on video. And by creating, whether it's bigger chunks of video walking people through, here are some of the new features, or even if it's tiny little chunks similar to what we saw on the YouTube channel earlier, where it's only a 2 to 3 minute video for each enhancement, and creating the library of recorded videos walking users through whatever the functionality is, whether we're talking about core functionality, whether we're talking about custom built functionality, or we're talking about something that came out in the new release. I personally prefer to do it in the form of video. People like to, I find that people like to consume it a lot better. People would rather have it sort of like playing on the side, and even on the screen. They'll have it on the side while they're doing other work, and then they'll just pay attention to the screen when something is relevant. And by the way, if anyone asks later, hey, how do you use that button? There's this new button over here on the right-hand side, and I don't even know how to use it. You could always not only point them to that particular video, you could also say it's on this particular video, it's at about the 15-minute mark, and just point them in that direction, and usually it gets you off the hook. Not always, but usually. I personally find that it makes it a lot easier as the admin for creating and maintaining that content versus the documentation.
Hey, David, I was going to throw this out there. I don't know if anybody saw it in chat, but I put it in chat too, just in case.
Yeah.
In past roles, I've created a like a Salesforce update, Salesforce user update chatter group.
Yeah.
And put things in there just to say, hey, this is what's going on, folks.
So yes, that is absolutely, Bill, that's a fantastic suggestion. That absolutely is a best practice, by the way, to have a chatter group and to add all of your Salesforce users into the chatter group. And you can call the chatter group something along the lines of Salesforce enhancements and questions, or Salesforce support. This way, if someone has a question about something, you can put it there, as well as anytime there's a new release and you have multiple things, multiple pieces of content that you want to share with them. So it could be in the form of screenshots, links to videos like I was showing you earlier. You could put it all in the chat or post. You could also tag specific either individuals or specific groups of people that you think might, the new functionality might resonate most with. So like, hey, Joe, I think you would really love this feature, kind of a thing. Or hey, at Northeast Sales Group, I think you would really love this feature. So yeah, I think that will help tremendously to have a chatter group. So one of the other things, I saw Jade in the, I'm trying to be mindful of the chat. It's hard to keep up with everything while talking and looking at the camera. But in the chat, Jade asked about like how to get the training videos into Salesforce. I'll tell you what I often do, very, very simplistic. Does not require any AppExchange app whatsoever. So there are many different AppExchange tools that you can leverage in order to sort of embed, including native out of the box. Salesforce has now in-app guidance where you can create your own custom pop-ups, reminders, etc. for people about new features. You can embed video into that as well. So you can absolutely do that. What I personally do most often is even more simplistic, more rudimentary than using the in-app guidance or any other app on the AppExchange. What I typically do is, as I'm creating videos, whether it's a tiny little snippet of a video or it's longer videos, so maybe let's say we rolled out a full suite of brand new functionality for a specific group. What I'll do is I'll have all of those recordings and I'll put those recordings. So again, I'm working as a Salesforce consultant. I'm working with many different organizations that are using Salesforce. So depending on my client, on that organization, I always ask that organization, what kind of, or is there any cloud-based document storage, file storage solution that you're currently using? Dropbox, Google Drive, Box.com are the typical ones. Of course, there are many others that you can tap into. And whichever one it is, I'll ask them if they can create a particular folder for me, a particular place where I can go ahead and put this content. If not, I'll just go ahead and put it in my own Box account or Google Drive account. And then I'll put all of that content in there. And then what I'll do is I'll simply capture the URL for each piece of content. And in Lightning, what I'll do is, I don't have my demo org open. Hang on one second. Let me open up my demo org while I'm talking. So what I do is back in Salesforce on the Lightning page layout for the homepage, what I'll do is I'll create a rich text component, put it directly on the homepage. And in that rich text component, I'll basically, hang on one second. I'm going to share with you just so you can understand conceptually what I'm talking about. So here you can see a homepage in my demo org. Everything in here is completely fake data. It's just for training purposes. So this is a rich text component. This is an example of a rich text component over here on the upper right-hand side. So if I have a video that's in a Box folder or in a Google folder, Google Drive folder, all I'll do is over here, I'll go into Edit Page. And I could either modify the existing rich text component right here, or if not, let's go ahead and I'll create a brand new one. So a rich text, I'll just throw it up here and I'll put something like links to Salesforce training resources. And of course you can play around with making it bold and different fonts and different colors, and you can put in emojis. You can have a whole lot of fun with it. And let's do, let's say new functionality on leads. Opportunity management, activity management. And then for each one of these, all I have to do is put the URL. So for now, I'll just simulate by putting a URL for Google, let's say. Right here, and let's simulate over here. This one will be New York Times, but I would put in the URL, I would put in the URL for the specific folder or the specific video recording of wherever each one exists. And then what I'll do is, now by the way, let's just kick it up a notch, with the dynamic visibility that we have in the lower right-hand portion of the screen. If this particular rich text component only contains content that's relevant for certain kinds of users, let's say only for sales users versus customer support users versus marketing users, then I'll go here in the dynamic set component of visibility, and I will go ahead and I will specify which types of users should see that particular rich text component. For now, I'm just going to leave it alone. Let's not do anything over here. And let's just go ahead and hit save. And end users are simply going to see on the homepage. Now, by the way, again, what I'll do is I'll grab a screenshot or make a short video saying, by the way, we've got new functionality coming out. We've got all these videos, or here are the resources where you can learn a little bit more how to use them. They're available right here on the homepage. I'll go ahead and grab a screenshot of that homepage with the arrow pointing to that particular box, and then they can all see it and they can quickly access it. Here you see, this one I made a link to CNN, this one I made a link to New York Times, and it'll take them directly to that content. They don't even necessarily realize that that content is sitting in Box.com or Dropbox or Google Drive. So you're just giving them the links, and from their perspective, it's available from within Salesforce, even though it's not housed in Salesforce. That's how I do it. Anyone have any questions on that?
Just as I mentioned in chat, I did do a couple training videos, and I just made a private YouTube channel and uploaded the videos as unlisted, then saved the links into the files library.
That's absolutely another way of doing it. Yeah, and also depending on the size of the organization, depending on how many videos you're going to do, Box or Google Drive might be a little bit crazy because it might be a little bit unruly. So other options to explore is having private videos on YouTube. Another one might be having a private, why can't I think of the name? Vimeo, a private Vimeo account, internal for organizations. So I've seen lots of other options like that that you can play around with. Absolutely. All right, what else do you guys want to talk about as it relates to the struggles that you have regarding release management? Talk to me.
David, can we ask questions only about release management today, or?
Well, right now we're focused specifically on release management.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, sorry.
Hey, David, this is Debbie.
Hey, Debbie.
Hey, I just wanted to let you know that one thing that we do with release notes, once we're trying to get them out to our users to show them new features, we created like an alter ego called Captain Loner, and he does, so we have different business units, and not all of our business units are in Lightning right now. So for my business unit, I do tech tips every Tuesday. So I do hashtag Tech Tip Tuesdays, and every Tuesday I do something new from the release notes. If it's okay with you, I'll go ahead and share one.
By all means, absolutely.
It's just to give an idea. Okay, can you see it?
Yep.
Okay, so this is kind of what I do. I just put hashtag Tech Tip Tuesday. A lot of this stuff, like I'll copy and paste from the release notes, and I'll just make it my own, and I'll make a visual.
Right.
So that way they kind of have a visual of what it is, because I feel like just putting in wording isn't enough.
The more visual you get, the better off you are.
Yeah. So this is kind of what I do.
Wait, the Captain Loner is a user. It's a Salesforce user?
Yeah.
I love this. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I'll just give them a heads up, like if, the release is coming. That way they kind of know that there's going to be new features coming out. So, and sometimes I forget to do, obviously you can see it's hashtag Monday Fun Day. I forget to do Tuesdays or something, and just use whatever hashtag I can.
No,
but I just thought I'd share.
And it looks like so what you're doing exactly what we were talking about before. So thank you, Debbie, for the visualization and taking it to the next level. And it looks like this is in a specific group. So look, I'm looking at the tab that you have on the upper right-hand side.
It is a specific group that is just for this business unit. So it's Salesforce Lightning for our creative capital team. It's everything Salesforce related in here that they need to know.
Yeah. And great. And you also have I see on the right-hand side, like the important links where whether they're other internal resources or anything else that they might need to reference quickly, you have it right there as well.
Yep.
Love this. This is great. Has anyone else done anything similar to what Debbie just showed? By the way, this is what we did, very, very similar to what we did when I was back at GE Capital, to try and keep users up to date, even though I knew that users were not necessarily, I took a little bit of a hard approach. Users were not necessarily, I knew that users were not necessarily going to be looking at the chatter group, even if I mentioned them, and I can't possibly mention 2,000 people. So what I often did was I would also send internal emails to all of our Salesforce users, referencing the fact that there was a chatter post, sometimes even putting the link to the chatter post. Basically, I took the approach of I needed to internally spam everyone, letting them know about these features. Anything that I could possibly do to avoid people asking me the same question 2,000 times.
So David, can I answer a question from Jade?
Yeah, absolutely.
So she said, how do users see this chatter group? Do they bookmark it? So normally what I tell people to do is I tell them to change their, especially for this group, to change how they see the posts. So for this group, I've asked all of our users, which we have about 55, to change it to every post for this group. And I also have them mark it as a favorite so that they can easily access it. Or they can pin it. I'm not real big on pinning, but I just don't want it to take up too much of my space across that bar. But a lot of times they'll favorite, or they just and I'll go in sometimes and maybe like have a contest with them just so I can see if they're paying attention and who's watching.
Isn't it funny how as admins, part of our role becomes marketing, internal marketing and internal communications?
Yes.
So I think in addition to everything that you just called out, I think that one of the things that I try to keep top of mind for myself is to sort of formulate all of my messaging around what's in it for them. So it's this way, instead of, or I should say, in addition to taking the approach of, hey guys, created this chatter group, created this post in the chatter group, put some videos in this chatter group, you really should be looking at it. Are you looking at the chatter group? So in addition to trying all of that, also basically calling out, hey, there's something new in the chatter group that you guys are, it's going to blow your mind. It's going to make your life way easier. Here's a link to the chatter group where you can see, it's sort of like driving them that way. So it's putting that communication, let's say in the form of email, or even if you're internally messaging, like if you're using Slack or something, and just sort of driving so you're not repeating everything in another format through another channel. You're sort of driving them by teasing them. Hey, I think you're really gonna love this content, and go back to that chatter group so you're sort of hammering it in several different ways, but from the perspective of what's in it for them. So it's for their own benefit to be in that group and to pay attention. But it's hard. Definitely hard. Anyone else? Anything that you want to talk about that you're struggling with as it relates to release management, or best practices that you guys want to share as it relates to release management internally within your own organization, how you're staying ahead of the new features? And when I say ahead, I mean before your users find out about it and corner you in the hallway and say, what's up with this? So how are you tackling that?
Okay, I'll talk again.
Go ahead.
So we actually, for this past release, we have, there are 7 admins. So we had a meeting. All of the admins got together with the developers, and we each took 1 to 2, maybe 1 to 3 items from the release notes, and we had to each talk about that. So that way it was just kind of something that each of us had a piece to do. So there were, I guess, about 20 some, maybe 30 some things that were talked about in the meeting, but we each specified on just, the specific things that we had to talk about in that group. And we think it worked out really well. We struggle with how to how to actually engage all of that, everything that's in the release notes, and we know that we can't. So we just all picked something that
it's overwhelming.
we had to demo it.
It's overwhelming.
It is. And we each had to demo a little piece just, you know, to show that it's not just that we're saying this is what it's going to do. We actually know how it's going to work.
Yeah, for sure. No, that sounds like honestly, it sounds, from what you just described, Debbie, it sounds like what you're doing is very similar to what a lot of user groups do, where, you know, different people are presenting on specific new features while touching on their thoughts about that feature. So in other words, like sometimes it's okay to say, look, this is a really cool feature. I think only a small portion of us are actually going to leverage it, but at least let everyone else know, here's what this new button or this new icon on the screen is all about.
Mm-hmm. Agree.
So I'm going to show you guys some other resources that I think you might find helpful. So one is right here on Trailhead. There is a trail called Prepare for Salesforce Releases. And as part of the schedule that Salesforce puts out all kinds of content, for those of you who are certified, you know that eventually you're going to get hit with a reminder that in order to maintain your certification, you need to complete the appropriate content in Trailhead. So what you can see over here is that it's got all the different modules associated with each of the individual releases. Where, here, let's look at any one of these. So you could see, for example, I'm thinking, wait, I didn't do the spring one? No, the one I recently did was the winter one, because what I typically do is I wait until the warning that your certification maintenance is going to expire if you don't do it. And then I'm like, okay, fine, I'll go and do that in Trailhead. But you can certainly not do what I do and be more proactive on it and not wait until the last minute by actually going through some of this content, which is also worthy to share with your end users. So let's just drill into here real quick. And this is rather low because I completed it. It's not showing a whole lot of content here. Here, let's go into the spring and you'll see where, let's say if I look in sales and look, you can see each one, like it's only 15 minutes worth. This is very light on the content, but there is some stuff in here. So this is another good way of just staying on top of, in case there's some content in here that you might have missed otherwise, staying on top of the latest releases. Something else that I'm going to call out, because we saw, especially because we talked about it quite a bit, even now during the session, is sort of getting an understanding, this is in a way a little bit broader, of application lifecycle and development models. So what we're talking about is, in a way, not necessarily about the releases that Salesforce puts out, the enhancements that Salesforce puts out, whether we like them or not, but our own internal releases that are going on within our own organization. So this really falls under the category of application lifecycle, to really get a sense of what methodology, what cadence, what structure, what processes should we be following internally within our own organization as it relates to an idea comes in, or a suggestion or a business requirement comes in for a modification to the Salesforce configuration that we have, and how do we go about vetting it, of actually capturing all of the business requirements, of identifying what is the gap between what the business needs and what we have today, and then going ahead and actually building out that configuration, going ahead and actually testing it, and then, as we talked about quite a bit even during the session, how to make sure that that internal configuration, those configuration enhancements, are compatible with the latest release that Salesforce puts out. Because as we're going ahead and building it out, and before we actually make it go live, Salesforce puts out a new release. And for the folks who are working on those custom features, it's like, whoa, we were not ready for this. And it might throw a monkey wrench into our entire release schedule. So these are some good resources that can help out as well. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually share. I have some of this. I put together a quick document. Let me go ahead and put that on the screen right now. I'm going to share it with all of you after we're done with this meetup, where you can see basically these are highlights of the different things we talked about. during this meeting. Anyone else? You guys talk to me.
I'm going to interject on that. Excuse me. I'm going to go back to it. The where you had the preparing for releases, that trailhead. There's
Yes.
that little heart on the left side that you can favorite, and that'll keep it in your homepage on Trailhead, so you can go back to it when new releases or new release modules come through. See right there on the application lifecycle, that heart, like you have that heart. If it's yeah, check on the.
Hold on one second. Let me go back to the one that you were talking about. You were referring to this one.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can just. There you go. So I added it to favorites. So yeah.
And
now
when
I
you go to your home page, you should be able to find it in your favorites. That way, when new releases come out and they have new modules that show up for it, boom, you can go and do those and get the overview without having to figure it out. See right there.
Yep.
And so that's one of those good things that you might want to keep as a favorite, even when you complete all the modules, because obviously new modules come through, new releases, learning, and always have your Trailhead homepage so you can always go back and learn more.
It never ends. It never ends.
No, nor should it.
That's right.
Learning is for the brain what exercise is for the muscles. If you don't learn, you're letting your brain atrophy.
Absolutely true. So talk to me. What else are you guys struggling with as it relates to Salesforce releases and managing Salesforce releases? I know that this is a big pain point for a lot of admins just trying to keep up.
I know this isn't about release so much as I'm kind of frustrated that Salesforce is now alerting users on how to change things themselves.
Like what?
Well, do you remember you can use a different type of activity view, and people can do that themselves, but I've had more people contact me, and I didn't even know about it because I hadn't seen that one yet, but I had a few people contacting me saying, what happened to my activity component? It looks different, and it took me forever to figure out that they had made the change because it pops up. They get this like an in-app guidance thing that pops up from Salesforce and says, try this new feature or whatever, so that they can make changes themselves. And I don't know if I want
Karen, I am completely with you. And I have another one that is a huge pet peeve of mine.
What's
but
that?
At least I'm grateful that Salesforce allows the admin to disable the feature that totally gets me bent out of shape. So hold on.
Which feature is it?
I'm going to go back to sharing my screen.
Okay.
I'm going to show you. So the feature is where, let's go back over here. Let's look for contact. And when you're looking at any record anywhere in Salesforce, you have the ability to click on the little arrow next to the tab. Mm-hmm. And first you can open it up in a new tab, right? So, okay, mm-hmm. You do that. Then what you do is you can add it to your navigation bar. And once you add it to your navigation bar, you can then go ahead and click on the pencil icon, and you can take so any end user can do this. You can go ahead and make it your first tab, your second tab, anywhere in Salesforce. And once you do that, look at what happens when I log into Salesforce. So now, end users might do this without necessarily realizing the impact of what they're doing.
Yep.
And then they're like, I don't understand. Why do I always see, because just imagine they keep doing this over and over again. And they're like, why is it that I have to click more in order to get to, let's say, the reports and dashboards tab or the leads or contacts tab? I don't understand. It used to not be that way. And you log in and you're like, I don't know what the heck you're talking about, because that assigned to you doesn't have that whatsoever. You have to actually do a login as them in order to see that. Now, what makes it even worse, by the way, watch this. So you see over here right now, I have the tab. It says Fred Flintstone. You also have or I should say, any end user has the ability to click on the pencil icon over here and change the name.
Oh my God. Oh my God. This is the stuff I'm talking about. Why are they letting people do this?
Yes. So what I do is as follows. I sort of struggle with, on the one hand, like I get it. This is cool functionality. And when taught appropriately, it's really powerful for the end user.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to strike the right balance between that and simply just automatically disabling it and never letting my users know that it's there whatsoever. It's a struggle. It's a very real struggle.
Yeah.
But yeah, to me, this just blows my mind entirely. And even now, as I'm talking, like I need to get rid of it because like my blood is boiling just looking at it right there on the screen.
Yeah, even the ability to let them rearrange the tabs is another one I don't care for.
So you can disable it, but
Yeah.
So let's go back to this particular feature since I'm still sharing my screen. I'm going to go into setup and I'll show you exactly where you can control at least disabling that feature. So it's in the app manager. And if I go into that particular app, so that app was called Sullivan and Walker. So it's the Lightning app. So if I go over here and I click edit, you're going to see one of the core options is right here.
Perfect.
So I could just check these off and they don't have those features available to them at all.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm totally with you as it relates to giving insight to users on how to use certain features that are either not relevant for them or confusing for them, or maybe we have various justified reasons why we don't want them using those features, as cool as they might be. What's even worse is if we have internal, let me hit the stop share. If we have internal naming conventions for things that introduce additional confusion to the Salesforce terminology. So for example, can't tell you how many times I work with organizations that they insist on renaming native Salesforce objects to something slightly different. And then when those same users are looking at any Salesforce documentation, the terminology is throwing them off. If we rename our account object, and we rename it, which by the way, I completely disagree with companies doing it, but I have clients that insist on doing it. They rename, let's say, accounts, they rename it to call it companies. And then native Salesforce help documentation references that functionality as accounts, like looking at the account hierarchy. Here's how automatically you can link other contacts to multiple accounts. So by having that documentation get pushed out to the end users are like, I don't even know what they're talking about because we don't even have anything called accounts. We don't have that functionality. And by the way, that's one of the reasons why that's one of the arguments I use to my clients when trying to get them to avoid renaming native Salesforce objects. I call it out to them in advance. They never believe me. They never think it's going to apply to them. They think their end users are always going to be on the same page, that they'll understand it anyway, but inevitably it always happens. So it can be a real challenge.
Mm-hmm.
What else? What else are you guys struggling with?
So I just have one question, David.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, hi, this is Sai. I work as a QA, Salesforce QA. Mostly I just test Service Cloud and Sales Cloud application once the developers develop it and push it to our sandbox. So I keep hearing that they always say the deployment failure and they're not able to completely push the data. So I'm not a kind of developer or an admin, but I always wanted to understand like, hey, what makes you to the data is not pushed completely or the job run job failure.
So you're talking about like the change set when moving a change set into production and you're doing the deployment and the error screen that you get when things fail?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. So
I wish I had a good answer for that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a point of contention that I definitely have, where when trying to do deployment to production with the change set and the errors that you get are not very informative. I wish I had a magic wand to fix that. It's something that I definitely struggle with a whole lot. I wonder if anyone else has any thoughts on how they tackle that one. By the way, this is why a lot of companies use other tools to manage their change set deployments within Salesforce. And then these other tools do not necessarily address all of the problems, but some of the problems. Yeah, it's a huge pain point. I think honestly, everything associated with change sets, even creating the change sets, managing change sets, deploying change sets, I think desperately needs some TLC from the Salesforce team. It's a very painful area within the Salesforce configuration that a lot of people struggle with, myself included.
Do you think it's getting easier with the use of the XML packages with DX? I know it doesn't solve everything, but at least you can list out everything in a very declarative thing and then push it into the new org. It's not perfect. I understand that, but I think it is getting a little better.
Yeah, it is getting a little better. It's taking a lot of time though.
I know with our admins, as far as trying to avoid those errors, we've got multiple admins developing in similar orgs, and we make sure that those change sets are owned by them, and they're only moving pieces of certain tickets in at the same time, so that if there is a fault, you're not questioning the whole set of tickets you're working on in that development, and you can piece it in and just get what you can. I also have had a lot of success with there's a Chrome extension that changes the way that change sets function a little bit inside Salesforce. You have to use it still in Classic, but it actually gives you filtering and shows you, the most recently edited fields and things like that. It comes in handy when trying to find your custom field you just added from the list of 3,000 fields.
Brandon, do you want to show it? I'm trying to remember what
Are
that.
you talking about Organizer, Brandon?
It's Booster.
Booster, yeah, Booster is what I've been.
I'm trying to find it now.
Okay. I have never heard of Booster, but Organizer lets you do that, and it works in Lightning, and it allows for much more stuff as well.
I'll have to look at that one because I keep having to jump back to Classic to get Booster to work, but I don't have a safe org I can demo.
It's okay. No, don't worry about it. Yeah, I wasn't trying to give you any pressure whatsoever. But yeah, there are some Chrome extensions that can help a little bit as it relates to it's more about creating the change set, which is a whole struggle in and of itself. Like, how do I find all of those fields or validation rules or page layouts that I need to find, because the native out of the box functionality is painful. It's really painful. What else do you guys want to talk about as it relates to release management?
If you want, I can show you Organizer.
Yeah, go ahead, Melissa. Thank you. I should get Enrico on Enrico Muro from Italy. By the way.
I've been thinking about him and this whole struggle here.
Yeah.
Oh, this is a developer org, so it won't let me do outbound change sets. Hang on just a second.
Yeah.
Get into one of my sandboxes here.
Robert, thanks for putting in the chat the link to, and I'm going to put it in the documentation that I'm going to share with everyone afterwards. The link to the Chrome extension.
There's also a select all one that maybe not directly
with objects. Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, that one.
And then I think it also lets you deselect all when adding fields to page layouts.
Yeah.
Lightning fast.
No comment.
Just remember that sometimes it's the speed is also a product of your own ISP.
Yeah.
Or page layouts. Yeah.
That's not really the problem with my org. We have a huge org. We've got all sorts of packages, CPQ, Financial Force. I deal with 500 internal users and 20,000 community users. So
wow.
it's a huge org. So you can see this is Organizer. It works in Lightning. You can actually extract a CSV of this so that you can push it against Workbench and validate it that way. But it also allows you to, once it loads the components, you can pick what you want and search.
Could you imagine search? Like, wow.
Does Organizer let you compare against another sandbox?
No, this is just a plug-in that this is my favorite feature of it. There's a lot more you can do with it. You can do queries with it.
Because I know that's one of Booster's features is you can actually log into a second production or sandbox and it'll show you side by side all the fields.
And that's cool. I don't know. I've never tried Booster. When we were talking about change sets and you said the thing that you didn't work or you used doesn't work in Lightning.
Right.
I'm just giving you another option.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It's all good.
Definitely want to look at it.
And by the way, this is why I love any kind of Salesforce meetup, because I'm learning something at the same time. You know, we can all learn from each other. This is great.
Can you share the link to that extension?
Sure. I will find it for you.
And I have it. Hang on one second. And like I said, I'm going to put it in the documentation that I'm going to share with everyone. So I'll send everyone an email afterwards that has the documentation as well as the recording. I see someone without a name on Galaxy S9 Plus wrote, we use Click Deploy, paid deployment tool that helps in resolving dependencies. Works well when compared to change sets. You want to talk about that a little bit, about Click Deploy?
Hey, David and everybody. Sorry, this is Shri. I'm only on audio at the moment.
It's okay. Don't worry about it. It's all good.
Yeah, I mean, we had been struggling with change sets for quite some time in our org. We have Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, and Communities Cloud. And a lot of time we end up with unsuccessful deployments because of missed dependencies. And a lot of issues when it comes to profiles, when we had to move profiles from one org to the other, changes to profiles, page layouts. So quite some challenges there. So we started using Click Deploy. This tool has been successful so far. It's a paid subscription tool. But it just, and even with change sets, the time to move the change sets from our U80 or the full copy sandbox to the production org, sometimes it takes hours, depending on your change volume. So we started using Click Deploy, which not only saved us time, but it also helped us resolving test coverage issues earlier on than later, and also resolving dependencies, specifically when it comes to multiple components and customizations that we had to embed in for the release. So it's worth trying that out. I think there's a free version available for some time. I would definitely recommend to try it out.
Yeah, you could do up to 15 deployments in parallel, up to 15 validations deployments per month. I'm sharing up my screen over here for Click Deploy. I knew nothing about it prior to this discussion, so this is great. Very cool.
I was really hoping, and I'm glad that you just brought that up, because when I signed up for this release webinar or this release management session, I was really looking to talk more about CI/CD. I just bought a book, Mastering Salesforce DevOps, that I am on chapter 3. We are thoroughly looking at moving up the deployment ladder. Click Deploy was one of the options that I have heard of. GearSet, Capado,
Yep.
some other ones. And I'm definitely looking at how we can move up that ladder. Any thoughts, David?
That's not an area of expertise that I really have, because I've really just stuck primarily with the native change set functionality. But if others have familiarity and expertise in that area, we can absolutely pivot and talk about that. It's because it's definitely an extension of release management for sure.
I got to use GearSet for the first time this week on a client, and I don't know anything about the other tools out there or even everything that's possible, but it was quite impressive. I don't know what it costs. I don't know anything about it. The ability, though, to compare, see the diffs, the new objects, and new fields, the new code, the old code. It was generally a great experience. I mean, there may be others.
This is Shri. That's spot on, actually. If you have a complex org, GearSet is absolutely great tool, and specifically around diffs. We are a heavily customized org. And sometimes when these releases don't go good because of probably one specific issue that happened to one of the component, GearSet really helps us to quickly find the diffs between the orgs and kind of help us move towards a faster resolution. Of course, it's a paid tool set. It's not free. But GearSet comes with a lot more features than Click Deploy. Click Deploy is more towards, just the deployment aspects. Basically migration of code from one org to the other, but GearSet offers a lot more features. GearSet also offers data backup and data extract facility that's much more faster than the data loader tool that we use, or the data downloads that we use from native Salesforce. It's an awesome tool set that's worth considering, if you're looking into CI/CD.
Has anyone looked at Prodly for this as well? Because Prodly is another tool that I often hear talked about for managing deployments from a DevOps perspective.
I have seen Prodly. I haven't investigated them thoroughly, though.
We are going to use the Prodly. We are going to get the trial licenses for it. And when we were discussing about the Prodly, they mentioned that they are going to work on version controlling as well. So currently they don't have that facility, but in future they're going to have the version controlling facility. And at the moment they are giving the ability to download or export the record specific to CPQ in a JSON in our local file, so that it can be used as a version controlling for CPQ.
Awesome.
Yeah.
What are some of the other tools that some of you have explored that we haven't talked about from a DevOps perspective?
I know one tool that I used, especially when I'm making new objects or a bunch of new fields and having to migrate them between the different environments, is Welkin Suite. Because you can go in there, you can export your FLS in a JSON file and move it between your sandboxes, so you don't have to go in there and click every single one. Or you can, if you don't want to export it, it's got a pretty easy check all so that you can quickly put your FLS in for all those new fields.
What's it called again?
It's the Welkin Suite. It was featured at Dreamforce 2 years ago. It's an IDE tool, and so you can connect right with your Salesforce, and then make those changes. Yeah.
Very cool. Just adding the link to this and documentation that I'm building out to share with you guys.
And this one, they have admin friendly version of it where you just flip a switch and it becomes real easy for your admins to use as well as developers, if you don't understand all the code and stuff written in there.
That sounds like that's the one advantage over Visual Studio Code. Do you find any other advantages other than switching to an admin view?
I've been trying to dig a little deeper. They've been keeping pace with releasing a lot of great features where you can actually build and clone fields and those kind of things. So if you have similar fields that you're building, you can actually just say, I want 5 of these fields, and then you go down, rename them, and fill in the properties. Like I said, I've used it heavily with building objects and transferring them between instances.
Ooh. Cool.
So this is supposed to be a workspace instead of the VS Code?
I haven't used that, but that's what I use it for, is just a workspace to kind of manually change that up. You can real easily see all your different objects down to page layouts and field level security broken out, and edit them in here, and then upload the changes.
Thanks.
And it's $150 per year for the org?
Oh, yeah, it's not expensive at all.
Wow. That's like not even a discussion then.
I bought it the first time, just my own personal license when I started using it after seeing it at Dreamforce, and then got them to get our company licensed. So
love that.
Say that the functionality isn't available in the VS Code?
I'm not sure. I haven't used that.
This is very cool. Let's pivot a little bit. I see Jade asked a question in the chat, which I think is actually a really, she brings up a fantastic topic, which is what happens when the organization, because this is so common, the organization as a whole really doesn't care about the new features that are coming out with the latest release.
Yeah.
And they basically just want to ignore it. And what is it that you're supposed to do, if anything? What is it that you're supposed to do when you're aware of all of these features and like nobody seems to care?
Right.
Oh,
So,
I've got one.
Yeah, go ahead. First, I was going to say, first I want to hear from you guys before I share like my approach to this, because it's a very, very real issue, very common issue. And it's frustrating as the technology geeks that we are, you see these new features and we feel like we have gifts that we want to give people, and like, yeah, I don't care. I'm not interested. Like, anyway, go ahead. Manny, go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm just saying, if you have a good, relationship with your boss, you just come in the morning and say, you're here, hello, I don't know. Well, no one can connect to our org anymore. He's like, what? Yeah, well, no one can connect anyone in the org anymore. Like a disaster and everything. Are you serious? No, but if you don't pay Salesforce the annual payment that I got and forward for you, what will happen a week from now. True story, and it did happen.
Okay, that's one approach.
Well, we had a customer and I was deploying something, and it corrupted in the sandbox. I couldn't log in, not in the production, not in the sandbox. And I thought to myself, what did I do to break the Salesforce? And then I just got from the login the message that Salesforce just blocked the org because of the payment that I was talking about a few weeks ago. They didn't pay.
Got it.
Jesus.
Yeah, I don't think you could really use that approach more than once, though.
Yeah, that's right.
Didn't someone mention a contest?
I think it was Debbie who mentioned the
Yeah.
contest with regard to her chatter, the use of her chatter group.
Yeah, so we'll just do like small things, you know, like maybe if we have like some Salesforce t-shirts, I don't tell them what it is, like what the prize is first, because then I don't want them to say, well, I'm not going to try and guess when it's only, you know, to them like a dumb t-shirt or something. But yeah, just trying to get them engaged in anything. Like usually if I go somewhere, like I'll bring stickers back, and you know, they love the stickers. So we bring them stickers back.
Works. Salesforce has turned all of us into 4-year-olds collecting stickers. Yes. And it works. Just embrace it.
It does. You know, they're always like, oh, you know, do you have new stickers? And so even like that, like just doing stickers with the contest, like they get really excited over that stuff.
Oh, they say it's for their kids.
And then they're stuck all over their laptops.
Yeah.
So one approach that you can use is to build the new thing that you want to institute in your org in a sandbox, and then set up a meeting to show it off. Build it out. They will come.
Sometimes that absolutely works. Yes. It depends on the people, on their mood. It depends on a lot of things, but yes, that can absolutely work, Melissa.
Depends on what advantage it gives them.
Exactly, it's about what's in it for them. Yes. So I'll tell you what I do a lot of times. We've talked quite a bit about how overwhelming it is with each release, where there could be hundreds of new features that come out. And a lot of times what I'll do is I'll just pick the two that I think are will address either like a huge pain point that we have today within the organization, it might be a productivity pain point, it might be a functionality pain point. So I'll just try to pick two that either will address a big pain point, or it might be something that like nobody ever thought of, but I think will introduce a huge efficiency of some kind internally within the organization. And of all the different features that are included in the newest release, I'll just take like those, whatever two things I think will resonate most with the audience that I'm targeting. And going back to what we talked about before, I'll use the form of video. And what I'll do is, I mentioned this a couple of times before, I personally love Snagit. So what I'll do is usually within Snagit, I'll start off with Snagit. You can not only use it to capture screenshots and annotate those screenshots, but I also use it for creating videos. And I'll start off recording the video where I'm just showing my camera. It's just a talking head. And it's basically me saying, and very animated with my hands and stuff, saying, hey guys, I just want to show you there's a ton of new features coming out with the latest release. I just want to show you two of those features. So the first one is, and then I click the button in Snagit to flip the screen so that instead of showing the camera, it's now showing my Salesforce org, and I'm showing the sandbox, the preview sandbox, where I have access to play around, where I myself got excited about that feature. And I start showing them, so here's what it is. And let's say, where now you have, let's say, the favorites capability, and I'm walking them through, and you have to give it within the context of the typical end user. And I'll start talking about how like, okay, so here I am looking at a report or dashboard, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to follow up with that client that my boss is bothering me about, or I want to access that list view that I created yesterday showing all of my open opportunities. So here I can go ahead and I can look in favorites and easily access it, and boom, I'm looking at that screen. So I basically will walk them through that functionality first, that feature number one, and then feature number two. And I'll basically end it off with, so these are just two of the features that I want to show you guys. There's actually a whole lot more. Some of it I'm still learning myself, but let me know if you're interested in learning more about rolling this out to everyone. And usually that as a teaser, so It's a short video, then it's just a couple of minutes showing them just 2 things. I'm making it optional for them. Usually they come back with excitement. Honestly, even if they don't come back, let's say I get radio silence, which is also very common. I'll get radio silence as a response. And if my attitude is whatever, like I tried, there's only so much I can do. If I can't get their attention, I just can't get their attention. But usually what will happen is it could be 6 months later, it could be a year later, it also could be 3 weeks later, and that they come to me and they say, here's a problem that we have, any way that we could fix this in Salesforce. And I'm like, oh yeah, there's a feature that recently came out. It's right there on your screen. Let me show you how to use it. And all of a sudden they're mind blown. Like, oh my God, how did this get here? I actually tried getting your attention about this a couple of weeks ago, a couple of months ago, but you didn't want to pay attention to it. So that's the way I try. Again, it's not foolproof. A lot of times it falls on deaf ears. They don't want to hear about it. They've got other more important things. They really couldn't care less. But that's how I try to tackle this issue.
Yeah, David, I've done the videos too. And I've learned from the users that they like them short and sweet and to the point. So I try and just make it, sometimes I'm recording that video or cutting out like even 5 seconds worth. I try and get it down to like 30, 40, 50 seconds if I can, just to get my point across, because, they're busy and I get that. But, I also want to relate that message to them. So
yep.
Yeah, I've done the videos. It's good.
And by the way, so to your point, Debbie, to even make the video, to trim it down even more, everyone's brains have been Twitterized. I talk about this all the time. Like for me, it's not part of my DNA. Like I went to school as a philosophy major and as an attorney. So I'm used to like tons of information coming my way and digesting it, but I've learned how to adapt because people's brains have been Twitterized. They want everything like in bite-sized pieces. Sometimes instead of the video, and I'm sort of going back to Snagit for a minute as the answer to everything is not technology, but Snagit does allow you to have a capture a video and then turn that video into an animated GIF. And then you can cut and paste that animated GIF into an email. So then I'm trimming it down to like maybe a 3-second GIF, just showing the button and the pop-up that comes up. And then that's it. That's all I'm showing them. And I'm in the words, I'm like basically explaining, here's a new feature having to do with favorites in Salesforce. Let me know if you want to learn more about it. So to trim it even further for them.
So I did that, and I can't remember how to do it, the GIF. So I did that one time, and it was probably a couple months ago, and I have no idea how I did it. I need to go back and learn it. But
okay, wait. So are you using Snagit?
Snagit,
Okay, so I can show you. So hang on one second. Let me open Snagit. I'll open my org, so we'll simulate. I logged out of my org. I closed that browser window. Give me 1 second, and I will show you. It's actually incredibly easy, and for the rest of you, you'll also learn how I use Snagit in general. So give me.
Yeah, I do like Snagit.
Capture a bunch of. Get rid of all this stuff over here that's clutter on my screen. Why is that not updating? Okay. 1 second, let me get rid of all these other things because I realize I'm about to share my entire desktop. So all these browser windows that I'm not even paying attention to are going to be clutter on the screen. All right, here we go. So you guys can now see my entire desktop. So I've got over here on the left-hand side, I've got Salesforce. Let's get rid of that remnant browser window. Let's get rid of that. We don't need that. And where's Snagit? So with Snagit, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go here, capture. Let's make believe we're going to do like a global action. I'm going to show them how to use global action, log a call, and it pops up on the bottom. Let's make believe that's what I want to show them. So I'll go over here, capture, and I'll go over here for video, and I hit capture, and now it's allowing me to choose what portion of the screen. So I'm choosing the entire screen. I'm hitting to record. It's counting 3, 2, 1, and now it's recording. Let's get that out of the way. And I go here and I click on this, log a call, and it pops up. It's not recording any of the audio. So call with client, and let's simulate. I want to show them how George Clooney and spoke with him today, and hit save. and hit stop on the record. So that was 20 seconds. Now here I am in Snagit. You guys could see the Snagit window, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So now over here with Snagit, I can, right over there. So you see over here, I have play. So I can, first of all, I can trim things out. So let's say like the beginning, that was not relevant. So let's just go right to the part where I'm hovering by that global actions icon. So I want to trim everything prior to that. I selected everything prior, I hit cut. And now over here, I just hit, there's an icon where it says GIF. See that?
Mm-hmm.
So I do that. Basically, it's giving me some options over here. I've never really paid attention to any of them. I just hit create. It goes ahead, it creates the GIF. Now what I'm going to do is let's simulate as if I'm going to put it into a Google Doc. So I'm just going to open a blank Google Doc over here. While Snagit just turned it into an animated GIF, I'm going to hit copy all on the upper right-hand side. I'm going to go right here and just paste. And I've got my GIF. And let's see, is it working appropriately? Hold on, let's do it in the form of an email. That'll be better. Come on. Compose, open up, let's go. Let's go into full screen over here. And why is it not animating? Let's see if I send it to myself. I sent it as a PNG. What the hell? You know what?
It's so nice to know that I'm not the only one who has these kind of screw-ups happen.
So what I'm doing is I'm dragging it onto my desktop.
Okay.
Let's do it that way. Let's go from here and open this up again. And now I'll drag it from the desktop. Where's my desktop here? Desktop. There we go.
Okay.
And now it's embedded within the body of the email. Just made it bigger so you guys can see. And by the way, sometimes I do the exact same thing if I'm creating a blog post and I just want to have an animated GIF. So Snagit is wonderful for all of these cool features.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. All right, what else do you guys want to talk about as it relates to release management?
I had one thing that just came up kind of back on the Salesforce releases and ID exchange.
Yep.
Salesforce is looking to add the ability for us to add multiple address fields on objects. That just is queuing up for winter 21, it looks like.
You mean as a real address field?
As a real address field.
Woo! That'll be very cool.
Now, this particular instance is troublesome for me because right now we're in the middle of 18 months worth of development for an account address object where we're making extra fields. And so I have a dev team that I'm thinking, okay, I don't need this anymore when Salesforce puts this live, and it's going to be so much trouble to maintain.
Yep.
But they also want to get it out before Salesforce gives me this. How do you deal with something like that? Because
okay, so this is a very real issue. So
is this formal? Is this really formal? That is it's final, you mean?
I mean it's on the ideas
on the idea exchange. Yeah, so what I understand that Brandon is saying is on the idea exchange, it's simply showing that it's being worked on.
Yeah, it's being prioritized and is number 2, and they mentioned Winter 21 on it already.
You know, the nonprofit Success Pack has an address object. They're probably just using
object, but not an address field. Yeah.
Oh, what do you mean? Because you said multiple addresses.
Yeah, so you could this release that could be coming. I know it's forward-looking statement, right? If they release this in winter, it means that all that work I don't need anymore. Because from what they're saying is it's being able to add more address fields to standard and custom objects.
Right. So you want it as opposed to that big block of free text.
Exactly. All that dev work that they're just putting in. That's going to be, they're tying to multiple objects and trying to build formulas to update the account address and everything else. And I'm getting pushback. I'm saying this is coming.
But what if it's not what you? What if it's not what you want? You know, what if what you're building is really what you want? So it might not be an issue.
Anyway, for the admin teams, it's a good news, I think.
Yeah,
it is. But when you've been working hard to custom build the same functionality that Salesforce is about to roll out,
right,
becomes a very uncomfortable and awkward situation for everyone involved. Because the team that's been doing it, like, if eventually senior management gets wind, even, you know, they do a Google search, they happen to stumble on a YouTube video to see that this is now native functionality, they're going to be like, what the heck? Why were you guys busy with this for so long? Even though internally, everyone who was working on it had no idea that Salesforce was building it out. They would have done the happy dance had they known that Salesforce was building it out. But now that it's here, it's like, we've wasted all this time and energy building out something custom that now Salesforce is making out of the box. This happens, Brandon, not only does this happen all the time, I'll say that the more common area where I've seen this happen is for an organization that wanted to move over to Lightning, but some functionality, example, case contact roles, was not available in Lightning. And then you needed to, the organization, they just needed, everything else was great, but they just needed contact roles. And then as the admin, you're like, oh crap, it's not available in Lightning. I just realized. Oh no. Oh my God. Like, this wasn't, working on cases was not even a core requirement when we first rolled out Lightning, but all of a sudden here we are. So you go ahead and as the admin, you're building out custom functionality to fill that gap. And then out comes native functionality that basically makes all the custom work that you did completely moot. Like, it's useless. And now you might even have duplicative naming conventions. Because I've been there, by the way.
Yeah, it's like
I had to build out a custom related object to mimic the functionality of case contact roles. And now it looks like duplicate functionality. So what I've had to do is, I believe in full transparency, being completely open and honest with my client. I told them at the beginning when we first encountered this of that functionality is not available today. We have no idea if Salesforce will ever make it available. But now as an organization internally, what you're saying is you need it today, you need it now. So let's go ahead and start the process of building it. But what's to say that Salesforce won't release it out in the future? We have no idea. Now, at the same time, you need to sort of compare, once it does become available, you sort of need to compare, does this truly give us everything that we truly wanted, that we built out? If yes, then we need to make the tough decision of do we just either stop the project, or do we sort of take away that functionality that we just rolled out and all of that work? And you have to be a little defensive about it internally from a political perspective. Otherwise, you know, someone senior within the organization is going to point the finger. You wasted. No, we didn't waste anything. We did what was good for the organization. We had no idea this was coming.
An uncomfortable situation is saying this, is getting asked, is this an out of the box? Can we do this and that? And I tell them, well, no, there is no out of the box functionality to do what you're saying. And a month later, come back and say, well, we can do it now. And he says, why? Well, why couldn't we? Why did you say it's an out-of-the-box solution a month ago? And I said, well, no, now it's possible, but a month ago, no.
Safe harbor.
So it's confusing.
Always throw the safe harbor. Caveat.
So Brandon, you are not alone whatsoever in this situation. But either way, I sincerely believe that full transparency internally within the organization is the only way to really handle it. And this way you're letting senior management, you're giving a recommendation, but you're letting them make the ultimate decision of which way do you want to go? Because like today at this point, you might be saying, look, it appears that they're working on it. We have no guarantees whatsoever that of when it will ever be coming out. And we have no guarantee that it will actually work the same way that our custom solution is working. So my approach would be, that recommendation would be, let's move it. Let's continue the road that we started down, going down, of building out the custom functionality. When it finally does become available from Salesforce, let's evaluate whether or not it makes sense. If it completely is a complete match, maybe it's even better than what we built custom, then the only choice we really have is to undo what we did custom in order to migrate that data now over to the newer function, the newer, let's say, object or whatever it is, the newer fields. We'll create those new fields on those objects where we wanted them. So I would give the recommendation, here's what I think of what I know today. Here's my recommendation. Let senior management make the decision. But this way, in the end, they can't blame you.
Right.
You're being open and honest and transparent with all of the data and all the information that you have available to you, all the insights that you have available to you.
Mm-hmm.
You're better off telling them now, showing it looks like they're working on it even before they come out saying, here it is.
Oh yeah, when I saw it Wednesday, I sent it directly over to the 2 product owners and said, hey, this is most likely coming, just so you know.
Yeah.
But Brandon, another point, I think important point is telling them that if we go with a Salesforce solution, we'll be supported and maybe more productive and more scalable in the future. And that way, if we choose to go with a Salesforce solution, it may be one good side of this is we'll be supported and maybe going on to other things.
Yeah, I mean, that's my main concern is the lift afterwards of the customization, maintaining it, keeping up with a table of zip codes, for instance. Just a heavy lift, and if we can avoid that, that's where my question
100%. And Brandon, something else that you, especially for this particular example, for this particular feature, because we're talking about addresses, I think even more so as it relates to any App Exchange app. So if you're using anything like, let's say, Cirrus Insight, like I'm using to synchronize data between my Google Contacts and Salesforce, or an Outlook sync, or any Gmail sync, or let's say something like DocuSign where you're pulling data from Salesforce to put it into something else. So as a native address field, even if day one, it's not going to be supported by those App Exchange apps, eventually, usually within a short time period, it will be supported, versus the custom solution that you built might not be supported by some of these other third-party apps that are on the App Exchange.
Mm-hmm.
So that can help you with your internal communication to here's why I think that the native Salesforce functionality might end up being better than what we just spent a lot of time and money working on.
Yeah. Thank you for the insight.
Yeah, my pleasure.
That was like the state and country pick lists that I know a lot of people had built pick lists custom for years, and then people desperately wanted that, and they finally released it. It's a bit more complex than I thought it needed to be, but
yeah, and that's also a beast in and of. I mean, it works great, but it is a beast in and of itself, especially
sure is.
The first time is a beast.
Yep.
Very painful. All right, we're at the top of the hour. I do have to drop. Guys, thank you for joining. I will be sharing the recording. I'll be posting the recording on YouTube. I'll be sharing the documentation that not only I created in advance, but I was editing it as we were talking, providing links of all of the resources that we chatted about. Thank you for joining. Stay safe. Wash your hands.
Thanks for
real fun. Thank you
again.
Thank you, David.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank you.
David.
Bye-bye.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.